Public feedback, sorry, for a future
Laid off the
agenda
press.
item.
Topsfield, that, plus.
I saw her, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, March 4th, 2025 meeting of the Middleton Select Board. And let's get right on with things here and begin with the town business, specifically warrant 2518 and facilities project 56. If you would, Mr. Sulzbach, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before you have warrant number 2518 dated March 6, 2025, totaling in on the payroll side of things at $855,000. A few items of note on there: $738 for Eagle monitoring, which we have our official Eagle monitor here in the audience this evening. Thank you. Good job. There is about $16,000 in overtime for the fire department, roughly $6,000 in overtime for the police department. Two numbers on the public safety staffing side of things that we continue to monitor throughout the year to help better inform our budget approach. And then also $12,000 in snow overtime, which thankfully I think we're.
Don't say it.
Yeah, okay.
Don't finish
We're
that.
close, though. Real close. Bills payable coming in just shy of $2 million. A few big ones on there. So about $600,000 for the Liberty Street water main. That is pretty much close to wrapped up. The final connection has been made. We're just going to let it settle for a few months, then pave it later in the upcoming season. $110,000 to replace a sander, which was an annual town meeting appropriation through the capital plan. And then $108,000 for debt service on the treasurer line. And then lastly, for facilities project 56, a rather large figure of $396 just for detail relative to some work they were doing along 114 there. So that's everything for now.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve warrant number 258.
18.
2518, sorry, as well as the facilities project warrant 56.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, passed unanimously. Thank you. And now we've have before us the open session minutes of our executive, no, I'm sorry, an open session on February 18th, 2025, as well as the executive session of February 27th, 2025. Any discussion or question on those?
Move to accept both as presented.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we get a motion and a second. No further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously.
I need to circle back on that. Should
Sure.
we separate those? Because I wasn't here for the 18th, but I was here for the
You can still vote
27th.
for it.
If you
I
believe
think
it to be
they-
true, you can
Yeah.
vote for it.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll just make a motion to accept the February 18th, and I won't vote on that
Well, if
one.
you believe they're correct, it's okay
Oh.
for you to
Yeah,
vote.
Oh.
it's not, yeah,
Okay.
it's not an,
I didn't hear you.
yeah,
Oh,
no, you can.
My head was somewhere else.
Okay.
Do you vote in favor?
I do.
She
Thank
did,
you.
yeah. It was unanimous. Okay, town administrator updates and reports from town administrator Justin Sulzbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few items around town. We've received news from the EOHLC that they are not accepting our action plan as submitted by their February 13th, 2025 deadline. They've determined as such that Middleton is now out of compliance at this time. So we'll continue to monitor that ever-evolving situation. We will begin the collective bargaining process with the newly formed library union this week, tomorrow actually. So we look forward to kicking that off. Town administrators, finance committee members, and select board members from Middleton, Topsfield, and Boxford have been meeting to discuss potential impacts from the proposed Masco budget and any override that might come out of that. So that group will be meeting at Masco's meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, March 5th, just to offer the town side perspective relative to the budget and associated challenges that we're experiencing. Greenbelt will be in town to walk the back portion of the golf course property with members of our team tomorrow morning, 9, I believe, or 9:30. So that'll be an interesting walk. I refreshed my fraud awareness training through the MCPPO program last week as part of the continuing ed component of my certification. Tri-town union negotiations are ongoing with collaboration from all three towns, and that includes the school administration, the teachers, and town administrators from each community. So it's the first time it's been done this way, at least in such a widely expanded and collaborative process. So it's been interesting having an opportunity to compare the documents relative to the collective bargaining agreements from each town and seeing what some towns have, what some towns don't, or how things are done differently. So we'll continue through that process. I walked the Ginger Mill property, which is behind the Candlelight, with Mr. Garber, Commissioner Fitzpatrick, and Planner Burry Carmer earlier this week, and we continue to explore different opportunities for that site. We had mentioned it briefly at one of your recent select board meetings, last meeting or the one prior. So we'll continue to take a look at it. It definitely has some challenges, but we'd like to see something happen there. And so we'll keep the board posted as anything comes up regarding that. And then broadly, in terms of the budget situation here in Middleton, we continue to meet, Jackie and I and Sarah, the finance director, taking a hard look at a deficit right now that totals around $1 million, depending on what scenario you're looking at. There's still a few outstanding items, a significant increase for health insurance is one number we're trying to negotiate down, although oftentimes it's fairly immovable. And then also the elementary school budget and the Masco budget are two very large drivers that we don't quite have certainty on yet. So as of today, if things stay the way it is with the Masco budget, we're looking at about $1 million deficit, which would obviously trigger the need for an override. So we continue to monitor that as well. Also, as a team, we're taking a hard look. We actually went through the budget line by line today, looking for surgical cuts that we can make in different areas, trying to scrape some amount of funds together just to minimize any ask we may potentially have to make at this point. We've identified about $100,000 or so spread out over the budget in small quantities, but we felt like it was an important exercise, and also just to further demonstrate to the residents of Middleton that we're really kind of leaving no stone unturned here. So we're taking it very seriously. So we'll continue to update the community as we move through that process over the next month or so, is when things typically really firm up, usually by the end of March, early April. And that's everything for now.
All right, thank you. Any questions? I have one. It's a bit of an outlier. Do we have, and I'm just thinking of it now because I'm thinking the chief. If someone was to have, hold stage a protest or, or want a parade or something, do we have it in our charter that they have to get a permit first through town hall? And I don't know even if you have that answer right now, but.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it is typical to have to try to get a permit for that type of activity. Have you come across that at all?
We do it all the time
Yeah.
for like road races and the like.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's typically an approval where we get sign-offs from Public Works, Police, Fire, and our office. It does not typically rise to board level, but if it's on the use of a public street or a public way, any kind of road that we control, they have to come to us and get that approval.
Okay, good. And then, from those entities that you mentioned, if they had, an item or two that needed to be complied with, we were able to do that as well. I mean,
Yeah,
it might not
sometimes-
have happened to this point.
Sometimes
but-
we require police details, sometimes DPW will put out cones if there's a road race.
Or direct where,
Yeah,
it can be held or can't be held, and,
correct, yeah. And we've let people use our property before for meeting places and the like. Most of it's road races, honestly. And then there's one neighbor that does a block party in the summertime.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've never had, but I just had a recent training that they went over that and it got my head thinking about, the things in today's world.
look at
that,
it to
we
ensure-
don't want to be behind.
A couple of years ago, I can't remember what the topic was, but there was a group that came in that wanted to hold like a vigil or something on public property, and I think the police were involved, DPW was involved and so forth, but I know they actually coordinated that through the town, so it's not an uncommon occurrence.
No, it just doesn't rise to this level typically. It's mostly a public safety issue.
And what was mentioned, I'll just go further, but what was mentioned was, as the bigger municipalities get better at coordinating them and having, reasonable restrictions, around free speech, some of these, activists are finding that they're not getting what they're looking for in those avenues, so they're moving to smaller, more vulnerable towns, hoping to, maybe catch them off guard. So that was all. I just thought that was interesting. I want to make sure I asked. Okay, thank you. And now we have a Middleton Municipal Campus update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were out there today, actually, for our weekly construction meeting. The project is moving along. There are a couple items that we continue to review as we move throughout the process, especially working in the conditions weather-wise that we've seen over the past month or so, taking a hard look at some of the masonry, some of the slabs they're pouring, make sure they're keeping them up to appropriate heat so they're curing properly. And so that's a lot of the work they've been going through over the last week, is just trying to identify any areas where there may be, cracking or anything that might.
Masonry looks great.
Yeah, it looks really good. So they've been making significant progress. I know on the front elevation facing 114, the public safety facility kind of had a big billowing sheet out on the front of it, and that's because they're heating those spaces as they're going through and doing all the brickwork. So they made some significant progress there, and then beyond that, we can continue some of the more longer-term items, trying to coordinate with MassDOT, for example, and figuring out what the curb cuts and traffic signals and things like that are going to look like in the road. So all in all, we remain very much on time and still about where we were in terms of being under budget.
All right, very good. It's going to be here before you know it. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at a year basically from now that, yeah,
Yep.
people be driving to a different location. All right, thank you. Do we have anyone here now? The next item is public comment. Do we have anyone present here tonight that wishes to make a public comment? No. All right, on item number 3 is a department head review of a floodplain overlay bylaw with conservation agent and our planner. If you ladies would step right up and can sit up here or whatever you like, whatever's comfortable for you guys,
So I'm Kristen Kent, I'm the conservation agent. We are proposing some updates to the floodplain overlay bylaw. They're mandated by FEMA because we have some new maps that are going to be going into effect in July. Every town has to do this in order for residents to continue to be eligible for flood insurance. So if we don't do these updates, residents won't be able to protect their properties. We've been working with the state floodplain manager and the state model bylaw, and so all the language that we've added is standard language that's required. We haven't done anything to change the intent of the bylaw or to change the way things are going to happen, the process. It's primarily definitions, designating a floodplain administrator, and then adding a couple sections on things that have come up in the last 10 years or so that have become an issue, like recreational vehicles next to rivers, stuff like that. So that's what we are proposing.
What type of notification happens to those that are now in a FEMA floodplain designated area that weren't prior to this? So now I expect if they had a mortgage, the mortgagor would actually notify them. But if
Yes.
somebody has a property that maybe doesn't have a mortgage, if their insurance company's not notifying them, how do they know?
They won't be notified individually.
Do we normally do any communication?
No. It's generally a civil issue. We're just making sure that future development doesn't impair or impede floodwaters, but pre-existing conditions, we don't do any kind of notifications to residents because we don't know the differences unless we went through property by property. The government doesn't tell us what the changes are either. We have to look at the
We
plan.
just know that these X number of properties are now in.
No, they don't even tell us that. They're like, here's the new map, here's the old map.
So,
Good luck.
Well, we could overlay it. And
We could,
determine-
yeah. If we wanted to do that, we could.
So I would assume if tomorrow FEMA drops a new map, doesn't detail lots, but let's say my home is in it, and then I wanted to do some work in my yard that requires something that would come before you,
Mm-hmm.
you would then notify or know that, hey, this is actually in the FEMA flood
Yes.
zone.
Yeah, it would come up as part of the building permit review if you didn't know that you were in there, yeah.
And this happens every 5 plus or
FEMA
minus.
updates?
Yeah.
10,
It's sporadic
It's
at
sporadic.
best, yeah.
about.
It happens to be our turn. I'd say 10 years, 5 years, something like that.
Okay. I always look for ways to kind of have people know that things are happening to their property,
Yeah.
whether it's through us, the feds, or others, and
They'll certainly be notified by their banks.
if they have a mortgage.
Yeah, which is the majority of properties that we come across.
Kristen, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How, if we look at the reservoir and we look at the Ipswich River,
Yeah.
and the properties that lie along that, how much work do you think it would be to do the overlay to see which ones change? Just trying to be proactive.
Yeah.
If they weren't in the, to piggyback on what Brian said, if they weren't in the floodplain and now they are with the new maps, I mean, if they don't have a mortgage, it may make sense. I mean, if there's 10 or 15 or 20, to maybe send them out a quick little note
Yeah.
and just, or letter and let them know.
I don't want to commit to that, but I can look, because I don't know what the number is. And I know that the Ipswich River floodplain elevation is going up by several feet, which is significant. So I guess the good news is a lot of the properties along the river, there's a pretty big grade change. So it's not if it's on your property, if you have a structure in the floodplain. So even if it's on a portion of their property, but it doesn't affect their house, then they still wouldn't
Then-
need flood
right,
insurance. So
right.
it's not an appreciable, it may not be a change for people.
Would our GIS system
Yeah, we
be
can
able
use
to?
Yep.
I think between that and the assessors, we can probably determine.
The only thing is it would be dependent upon when FEMA gets
Yeah.
the new maps in the layers
Yeah.
for the FEMA floodplains to our company, CAI.
So it would be after
That
they went
may
into
or may
effect.
not happen right away. They're not always real quick. It's to get them to us.
Do we have like when we do know that there's a lot that's in the floodplain, FEMA flood, 100-year flood, whatever they call it?
Yep.
Is there like a flag on the assessor's maps or anything that says, lot number 42 is
So-
actually,
What you do is you actually check off a box for the FEMA flood, and it will color it. So
No,
you would be able to see.
there's not like an overall listing of that. It comes up on a case-by-case basis.
You're
So-
just going to see it on the parcel.
so if
in
you
the
are looking
color.
at lot number
I'm the one that
42 and
checks.
you look at it and say, oh, look, actually that's in it, then
Yes.
that box gets checked.
Yes. So if somebody filed, for example, to put an addition on their house and they didn't realize they were in the floodplain, that's part of my review when I look at every single building permit, is to see if they're in any wetland resources. And if that were the case, they would have to file with conservation. If they're allowed to do it at all, they may not be allowed to do it at all. Or they may not want to, because it may create a situation where they would then need flood insurance when they didn't
When
previously.
they, yeah.
So it comes
So-
up on a case-by-case basis, but we are able to, through the GIS, to look and see.
For what it's worth, I'd like to see, if you could, I'm not asking you to do it, but to see what it would take to actually do that. And it's not something that I'm saying we're going to have to say at town meeting and say, here are these 92 lots.
No.
But that would be something in the future that
Yeah.
could be identified. I think it actually may help you in the future when, somebody's calling you saying, hey, they're doing work at the lot next door, but I don't think they're in the floodplain. You can look and say, well, actually they are, instead of having to do the full-blown research. But secondly, it'd be nice to, folks to have knowledge of this, because I'm sure there's cases where folks that just didn't know, and maybe starting a process that have gone down the road expending money, and now they're
Yeah.
coming before you or the building commissioner because they want to do work, and now finding like, whoa, I
Yeah.
had no idea.
And that does happen. I had a house that, when he first purchased it, was in the floodplain. Fast forward, it was a 10-year update.
Yeah.
He was now out of the floodplain.
Right.
Bradford Pond is behind him, but he was far enough away. And that just created havoc for him, and all he was trying to do was put in an outdoor kitchen.
Yeah.
And I ended up writing a letter to his insurance company and his mortgage company. So his mortgage company never notified him.
Yeah.
It was internally in the town that it was brought up.
I mean, I guess the other thing is, We can take a look once they're released. I can't do anything until the layer
Yeah, of
is
course.
released because it's paper right now and it's just impossible. So after July 8th is when they go into effect, and we can take a look whenever they get released, when Brad has them. We can start going through and identifying the properties.
Okay.
And we can find out, I'm sure Brad or I can contact CAI, which is our mapping company, to find out how soon they will be updated with the new FEMA.
Yeah. And there are properties also that were in the floodplain and they petitioned to be out of it, and they were successful, and that isn't reflected on the maps. So that's a case-by-case basis.
Do you need any action from us tonight on this?
Or-
Wanna vote?
Actually, Costa just showed me the current map that shows, I mean, maybe one of the things that we do is when that map gets updated after July, is literally have a link in our site that says, you know, floodplain maps have been updated by FEMA, and click here to see your lot, where you literally click on it and you'll see who's in and who's out. That may just, any opportunity we can to actually just
Yeah.
arm the folks with knowledge.
And put it in their ballpark to look at it, you know, independently.
And so I believe you'd like the board to send this on to the planning board.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the floodplain overlay bylaw be referred to the planning board.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Anna,
much, ladies.
You're
Thank you,
having the public
girls.
hearing next week for the planning board. I want to just announce those details for people that are watching at home that care.
Planning Board public hearing is scheduled for March 12th to review this bylaw, so please, if you have public comments, come at that time. It'll be at Fuller Meadow at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, next on item number 4 is comprehensive zoning consultant review team discussion for a select board liaison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, Anna, before you run away, just so you got credit for your efforts on this. So among the many items Anna has been chipping away at, one of them is taking a good look at the comprehensive review of existing zoning in town. This was an initiative that was taken up maybe 2 years ago or so, and then unfortunately over the course of that process, there were some state initiated zoning-related items that came up, MBTA zoning and the ADU bylaw, that kind of, I guess, hogged all the attention of that process. And so we're trying to do a little bit of a reboot here. Anna's put together an RFQ that was available in your packet. And one piece of this that I'd like to call your attention to is there's a reference on the third page at the bottom to a town's consultant review team. And that is the working group that is going to review the proposals that come in from the RFQ. And so when it went out 2 years ago, it was a relatively narrow team that included the planner, myself, Jackie, and I believe the planning chair. And so after discussing it, Anna and I determined it'd be better to broaden that a little bit. And so we've asked that it also include a member of the ZBA, as well as a select board member and the building commissioner. And so that's how this landed on your agenda this evening, is we're just asking if there's anybody on the board that has interest in joining this working group to review these proposals when they come in.
Can I ask a question? So this group work would be done once the consultant is chosen?
Yes. Yep. So they would choose, I believe, the top 2 or 3, and then pass those on to the planning board to be interviewed in the planning
Well,
board.
once this process starts, this group would
They
be,
would disband.
okay.
So is there anybody that would have interest in?
I'll do it, Justin.
Thanks, Debbie.
Oh, thank you, Deb.
All right. Good work.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, item number 5 is a recap of our recent capital budget Saturday. And if I could ask you, sir?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I touched on it a little bit in the TA update, but specific to capital, we were able to get together a capital plan. We made a couple cuts. It was a productive day. It lasted about 7 hours or so. Nothing terribly controversial in the capital plan. But I think a lot of the heavy lifting towards the end relative to the operating budget, for me anyway, was the biggest value of the day. I don't know if any select board members have any thoughts on that relative to the override as proposed, but now would be a good time to offer them.
Do you want to talk about the potential Masco override at this point?
Sure.
I mean, their budget increase is currently at 9.6%, which creates a need for an override in all three towns. The question that for us to consider is how much of the increase should Middleton put on an override? You know, we told the elementary everything over 2.5 goes on an override. Do we want to treat Masco the same? Or because of a quirk in the assessment formula, keep our assessment flat to this year, which would equate to a 4% Masco budget increase. So do we treat them and our elementary the same, or do we go to the max that we could fit into our levy?
So my thought is keeping the same, and the reason for that is I think we have to get to a process where we go into the budget cycle of this is the number we're asking department heads, outside entities like Masco. Essex Tech is a whole different organization because there's so many communities involved in that. But I think the reality is for too long we're going to go with this percentage over here, but we're going to recommend this percentage over here. I think we should be treating all the same, understanding that this is a perfect storm cycle of education budgets are going up significantly to a level that is becoming unsustainable. And so if we're making an argument to the elementary schools, I think it should be the same argument to
So
Masco.
anything over a 2.5 Masco budget increase, whatever that translates into our assessment, that is the override.
Yeah,
Because we treat the two
and
school
understanding
districts
it
the
may
same.
or may not fit within our non-override omnibus budget. We're going to have to. But it's kind of at some point, I assume, Justin, when you started the process with the three communities talking to Masco, you guys provided some level of guidance in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Was it 2.5 or was it 2?
Actually, varied from all different communities.
Town by
but,
town.
But more recently, we met with the administration at Masco and it laid out the reality that this is really being driven by the financial situation in Topsfield, and that out of the three communities, they have the least remaining in terms of their levy limit. They're right up against their ceiling, and so that's really going to dictate where we are. And what that would mean is, I think it was representative of something like a 2% aggregate increase for Masco is what can be fit within the three towns' budgets, taking into account that Topsfield was at the lowest.
Can I ask something? So, on both schools, how much of that is health insurance related? Because I mean, we're telling them 2.5% budget, but could they even fit just the health insurance increase in that box? Because they have you control that, we control that, they have no control.
No, we really don't have.
We don't control
Nobody
it either,
controls that.
but
Well, they don't control it, but it comes from us, it comes from.
Well,
they have-
not on the Masco level. That's
No,
theirs.
right, not on Masco, right, but in the elementary, it comes, you
To us.
negotiate it, if there is any negotiation, and they get a number that has to fit in their budget, so I'm just wondering, in Masco, I know that we don't, but I assume it's a similar percent increase, maybe more, maybe less. So my question is, could they even fit that in the guidance that we're giving them?
So the guidance that we had provided relative to the elementary schools was, I can't remember if it was 2 or 2.5%. It's 2.5% plus health insurance.
Okay, so it's plus
So
health
we're being mindful of the fact that, hey, we're getting hammered on that too. Like, it's not fair for us.
Before we really got hammered,
Yeah.
but we were partially getting hammered.
We were projecting to get hammered, and we really got hammered. But it wasn't fair to hold the schools to a standard that we're not holding ourselves. to.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, so
that-
we've been
okay, there
very
you go.
mindful of
Okay,
that.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, the reality is all three towns, based on the direction that Masco's heading, all three towns are gonna need an override to fund the assessment,
In some form.
in one shape or another.
And Topsfield is talking about having two Masco overrides, a mini override and a bigger override.
In the same year?
How do you do two?
You put,
No, but what if the mini passes and the larger doesn't? Are they,
no,
they're not fully funding their assessment?
well, it only matters if the other two towns pass their overrides, right?
Well, Topsfield's first, correct?
Yes, by a week.
Across the board.
So, because in order to fit a 2% budget increase, at 2%, their assessment increase is 436,000. They can't fit 436,000 in their levy.
Current levy capacity.
So they'll fit as much as they can in their levy. The rest of the 436 is what they're calling their mini override. And then their total, as it stands now, their total assessment increase is 1.3 million. Subtract the 436, and that's like 900 something is their big Masco
Big
override.
override.
So for the Masco assessment budget to pass, they would have, Topsfield would have to pass both the mini and the large overrides, and one of the other two towns would have to pass its override. If Topsfield only passes one of the overrides, and the other two, and one of the other towns, and the other two towns pass it, they're stuck with the override that didn't pass.
Well, they're stuck with having to go back to town meeting to figure out how to fund the remaining portion.
Or make cuts.
Yeah,
So-
or make cuts. We've been there, done that in the past.
The discussion is, if each town passes a budget figure at the same level, even if the overrides don't pass, then at least Masco has an approved budget amount. And they may want to come back and recertify a budget, and then force the towns to say no to that through another town meeting and town election. But they don't have to.
Or Masco has the ability to force a three-town vote, like single vote.
Not immediately, no.
That would be after July.
I mean, I know they can do that with the capital override. I don't know about an operating over, and I don't think one failure is enough. But, if there is no approved budget, they have to come back with
But
something.
realize it wouldn't just be, if that budget is not funded and has to go back to one, two, or all three towns, it would still be going back with an override basis, or at least in Middleton it would. So that would be another town meeting and another municipal
Well,
election.
The difference is, once they recertify, if you don't hold the town's option is to hold a town meeting and a town election in order to say no. If you don't do it, then you're stuck with whatever number they recertify at.
So what would be,
So to say no.
so again, back to the 2.5, that at least gives us a 0.5% of wiggle room ability of, in that scenario, we're funding Masco by cutting, if the override fails, and they come back and they reassess,
Recertify.
thank you, and it fails again, then
You have to cut.
the third option is we actually own that number.
Well, it depends on, when you say the override failed, just in Middleton or,
Well, if it fails in
two of the three.
If it fails in two of the three, then it's back to the drawing board. If it fails in just Middleton,
If it fails, we own it. They don't have to do anything. If Topsfield.
no, I'm saying the second go-around.
If the second go around, whatever they've recertified at, and, there's different overrides again, and Middleton says no, but the other two towns say yes, then we own the number.
So, I mean, and I said this at our February budget hearing, based on where the enrollment shift is gonna happen the following fiscal year, I mean, the likely scenario here is a Masco override this year for Middleton and the other two towns, and a likely Masco override the following year.
And it could be in all three towns.
Could be in all three towns, but
Because-
the scenario that I'm looking at is surely for Middleton, we're probably talking about a second operational override in the FY '27 budget.
So,
I mean, I'm not a
Part-
crystal ball reader, but it's,
part of the issue for the FY '27 budget is that Masco's revenue is gonna be going down by probably $600,000 to $700,000, because they're gonna be ending this year at break even, whereas the FY '26 budget is funded by $712,000 from E&D. The FY '27 budget will have nothing to fund from E&D. So,
Oh, so what's that?
it's their free cash.
excess and deficiency. So, the assessment in '27, the gross assessment for the three towns goes up by 700,000, 600 to 700, plus whatever the budget increase is. And even at a minimal 3% increase at that point, you're talking about 2.2 to 2.5.
So structural deficit is being built by the usage of the E&D. And so, and then add to that, what is the expected Middleton share shift that's going to happen in FY '27? I mean, the likelihood is we're looking at a scenario for an override that would be even, for Middleton, that would be even larger than is being proposed this year for Masconomet.
No,
Depends on what they're
it-
requesting.
So that shift changes to a less favorable one.
So, if we,
Not a general budget increase for Masco, but
I
I'm
know.
saying, based on our assessment.
if we put everything over a 2.5 budget increase for at Masco on an override, at the current budget, Middleton's override for Masco will be $922,000. Even with the sort of enrollment shifts and all that, I don't see the FY '27 being that large. It'll be large.
Even with the 7% deficit that's built in from the D&D,
Yeah,
and calling it a 3% increase?
So can I ask, so each town will have likely an override to approve the Masco, but it could be 900,000 in Middleton, it could be 100,000 in Boxford, and it could be 400, it could be a different amount in each town?
Yeah.
So
because
like-
we have a different
Right,
assessment.
right, so that could have something to do with who passes it and who doesn't.
Well, right now,
By, absolutely.
Topsfield's two overrides will probably be well over $1 million
For Masco.
for
Are
Masco.
they proposing a municipal override?
I don't know.
Justin, do you know?
I know Boxford is.
I think it's no municipal. Boxford is municipal and debt exclusion. Topsfield's just schools.
Yep.
But
So
they also,
Boxford's not proposing a school override.
Not
Or
for the
did they?
Elementary, they are
merge?
for Masco.
Correct.
and Boxford's could be, they're could be as little as 600,000 or as much as 900. They still haven't figured it out. So it'll be significant overrides in all three towns.
Speaking of schools, what guidance have we gotten to date from Essex Tech in terms of what we're looking at this year for an assessment?
It increased, I don't know the exact number, but we reviewed it.
It's up to, I think, it was like a 160.
Yeah, I was gonna say 186 out in my head, so somewhere, it was just under 2.
We saw an enrollment shift though of at least 6 students.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 8 students.
The
So
per
went from
pupil,
54 to 62.
the per
Yeah.
pupil cost was largely unchanged, it was just more kids. And then I suppose just to round out this conversation about the town side override here in Middleton. So as part of that conversation on Saturday, the group did come to a consensus about what that would look like. Going into it, there was some discussion whether or not deputy fire chief would be added, and ultimately the conversation was that it would be set aside, and if it could be built into the budget in future years, that it's something that would be seriously considered. But there were concerns that it may have negatively impacted the ask in terms of an override, being that we are so short-staffed with, boots on the ground, even though with full understanding that even our own chief goes out on calls. And so with that said, the landing spot for the override was 4 firefighters, 3 police officers, plus their benefits, and so it would come in under $1 million, roughly $985,000. We're going to be finalizing that number, and in conversations Jackie and I had today, we're going to start getting on lists to go to different associations and really kind of hit the bricks early this year. Just trying to get that message out and help shape that and get ahead of it. So
I'd also state, I know it's in the budget section of our website, but I think it's important to highlight it singularly in our website. The presentation that both of our chiefs made, specifically around the ask, was extremely comprehensive. Was an eye-opening to me because both have been clearly making this argument for multiple years, and the data has proven it, but I think it would be highly helpful for folks that are either going to walk through the door at town meeting or walk into the polling booth the following week, the May 20th, for the actual override ballot vote, to actually see clearly in black and white, actually, they were in color, the rationale for these positions. And, I mean, we talked about it this evening when we were just going through our warrant, the volume of overtime that continues to persist within the 2 departments is, surely the canary in the coal mine of there is a staffing issue there. But, I'll call out the fire chief and his presentation on the budget Saturday, specifically around the volume of calls, how many of those calls are taking men and women of the department out of the town for transporting to area hospitals, and what that has meant for additional coverage. While I love that we have mutual aid, I think part of what makes Middleton is the volume that we're able to cover ourselves with our great men and women in the department, both paramedics and otherwise. And same for Chief Sampson's presentation, which is clearly showing the volume and the types of calls that are happening, but also the expansion of the work that the police department has done around detective work that has really allowed cases to be closed, but more so the work and the recognition that has come from our state and federal partners from the work that the beefed up detective unit that has developed. And I mean, it's an example of what is happening in policing in Middleton. This isn't, of Middleton of old, which was, driving around and enforcing the road laws and regulations. Is a lot more involved in that, and just what our police officers are responding at. So I would highly recommend that we take those presentations and highlight them on the homepage of the website to further educate the public of the rationale. I know that'll be the messaging as you're going around to groups and organizations and neighborhoods to discuss this, but, and I'd also, I think it would be maybe a worthwhile endeavor to do, kind of another public session. Well, that Saturday session was really important, and I'm sure some people have seen it, but maybe another evening budget session with the two chiefs, having the opportunity and their senior staff to kind of lay out exactly what this means and what it would mean to have 4 new firefighters and 3 new police officers. I mean, Chief Sampson, I'll call you out constantly. We're all being requested on this board through social media, can we do more targeted enforcement of speeding and other items around town? Well, that takes bodies to do that. It's not, to do so now, we're taking the men and women of the department from one function that they're working on and moving over here. And that I'll ask the members of the board, how often do you get that request of, this car speeding on East Street, this car speeding on School Street, and so forth? That takes bodies to do that, and that's my usual comment when folks ask that. It's not that, our department is sitting around doing something else that's not meaningful. They're doing meaningful things, they just don't have enough staff. And then for Chief LaCoste, the numbers that you had showed in your budget of the number of calls that are being taken outside of the town, and how many times the department has been staffed at 1, 2 individuals in the station while you're waiting and praying for callback, and we can't always rely on our chief leaving his house at all hours of the day and night to backfill, because that's not a sustainable model. So I'd highly recommend if we could do maybe another evening segment to really get this message out, and then allow people to ask questions.
And let, people see the calls for service to both departments are what inhibits other special attention that, people, feel is necessary. And that a lot of us agree. It's not just what, one neighbor on their street, but we all know what traffic and what driving's like. We live in town. But the very mere calls for the basic fundamental service, whether it be residents or passers through, for the staffing, you just, you're not going to get. And if you get someone long enough to sit in a certain area, designated, there's a call to, go somewhere else. And so it's maybe, statistics are there that if people want to look at them and, give them some thought, that you can kind of see what goes on in any given day, or however you want to look at it, period. But
So I clearly say our departments are doing the best they can, these two departments, of dealing with issues as they arrive. Where I think additional staffing will also have a meaningful effect is the proactive activities that are happening. I mean, I just saw on social media the other day, our chief, as part of the program, visiting homes to do assessments on smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and lo and behold, there were some homes that didn't have any functioning smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and through grants and other dollars, we're able to make sure that those homes were protected. That's going to save lives. That's going to save the response, the possible needed response of our fire department. And then again, to the police chief's case and the police department's case of being able to do more proactive enforcement, proactive education, and other activities that just aren't able to happen with the current staffing. And, I mean, nobody should be surprised by this. The town has grown, but at the same time, policing and fire and emergency medicine response has changed in the last 5 to 10 years greatly. So this isn't a want, this is a need, that if we do not get the support to fill this, I don't want to be the doom and gloomer, but there's going to be issues that we're going to have to look ourselves in the mirror and be honest about what that's going to mean.
So we'll continue to communicate that to the public as we move through the process. I anticipate come March 18th, when the warrant is closed, we'll have a much firmer but not yet finalized picture, and then I think the 9 days or so between then the public hearing on the document, a lot of those final pieces regarding the schools and everything else are going to settle, and will help us hone in on that final figure. So we'll be reaching out to the public. We hope people pay attention and tune in, and we'll do our best to make it a transparent process. And with that said, also on the agenda this evening
No, go ahead.
is a review of updated list of articles for the May 13th, 2025 annual town meeting warrant. Nothing has changed at this point in time, although based on some conversations we've had, there may be an additional Masco warrant article in here for that middle tier, but that's going to shake out based on how the meeting goes tomorrow night. So at this time, everything is the same in terms of substance. We are working with Madam Moderator to potentially reorganize some of these items in a way that would flow more beneficially at town meeting, and so we'll have an update on that at your next meeting. And I would also anticipate, now that this is firmed up, we're going to continue with the drafting process with the physical warrant document, and so I think we'll have a pretty good 95% warrant draft for you at your next meeting as well.
All right, thank you. Is there any other questions? No, then we'll move on to having an update from our Charter Review Committee on their recommendation for town meeting. So if I could ask those individuals or individual, take it away.
Hi, Natalie Lovett. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Charter Review Committee, along with Trevor Currier. George Dow from our committee is also here. So we, after 3.5 years of review of the charter, we are officially presenting a article to make some changes to what's existing. The original charter was from the 70s, so it's 50 years. It's taken us a while to kind of very methodically go through it and meet with department heads, meet with the boards, and just to make sure that we're being as thorough as possible. We've met several times with town council and had town council and labor council review our proposed changes. The vast majority of them are really kind of language clarifications. It brings the charter up to current practice for how the town has been operating. And I think that you all have copies of the proposed changes. I don't know if you had any questions, but we're happy to answer.
Sure. A couple of questions I have. I know there's some sections that are being deleted in their entirety. Give an example, 6.8.4. And a lot of these recommendations are because they're old and outdated. But I think it would actually be helpful to actually have the section that's going to be deleted. Because I think this is the document that we have here. I assume something similar to that would be provided at town meeting. That'll be kind of like a crosswalk for folks to see, like the sections where you're amending or you're actually deleting a little bit of language or adding a new section. It's pretty clear, but on these, unless somebody actually has the charter next to them plus this list, they're going to have to go back and forth. And while I hope everybody that walks into town meeting will have read our charter and then actually crosswalked it, other than George, nobody in town probably knows every single, well, you do probably as well, and on the committee. So outside of the committee, nobody knows every line of the charter. So I actually think on those sections where you're deleting, even if you're deleting something that's extremely outdated and makes sense, like somebody will look at it and go, that makes sense. I think that would just be a really good crosswalk.
Yeah, Jackie, I haven't communicated with you, but I think that you've talked with Trevor or Sharon.
Yeah, I can
and
own this-
believe
that
that you have
project.
been
Yeah.
making a red line version so that that is kind of clear where there have been deletions.
In the warrant, we're going to have this document, which I do want to send a lot of kudos to Sharon Bainbridge, both on our team and on the Charter Review Committee, who made this document and did a really great job, because this is a lot of work to do, and I really appreciate it, because this is also what House and Senate Council will ask for when it's time to do the home rule petition.
But is our
But I'm gonna-
warrant going to be colored?
Well, we can do this section colored.
Okay.
We can prioritize it. But also, in addition to this, so like, if you're somebody who learns like Justin does, you want this. If you're someone who learns like me, you want a tracked changes version. So I had offered to the committee at their public input session that I would offer to, based on this, do the track changes for them. So folks, it'll be on the website both ways, it'll be in the warrant both ways, so that whichever way you like to read it, you can read it successfully, because people will consume it that way they have the option of consuming it how they want to consume it. Because I will say that Sharon's document here is fabulous. I have been handed bylaws and committee recommendations, and the attention to detail that she has done in drafting the committee's recommendation, I really
Yeah.
publicly
very good.
want to compliment her on it. I said it to her, but she deserves a lot of credit. This is a really excellent document.
Thank you, Sharon Bainbridge.
I do have one concern, though. So 90% of this is logical changes, changes in the law, obsolete things, changes in modern language, which I think everyone would agree on. There is a couple of things that somebody could have an opinion on, one way or the other. And to group it as an all or one article, if there was one, if somebody liked every single one of these changes and there was one change, one of the changes that actually you could have an opinion one way or the other on, and they have no opportunity, so the way that this is being proposed, it's all or none, and that's a concern that I have.
Well, I mean, if somebody
you can-
has, a particular concern about a particular thing, can always
Be
come
amended.
Amended on the floor.
Yeah, to take that out and vote on it separately.
Well, I hope that at the start of this article, that the town moderator would explain that, so, because
Yeah.
how would people know that?
Right.
Because there is
I mean,
maybe
if
two or
you were
three
gonna-
that people could have an
If you were
opinion
going to break
on.
it out, the logical breakout would be by
Can't do them
chapter.
individually, though.
Yeah, so I wasn't at the committee's last meeting, but I know that they did discuss the suggestion of breaking it out, and it was just decided that it would be very difficult to determine which pieces to break out and group. I mean, you could certainly take out a section of one of the chapters if it needed to be amended on the floor, but the committee ultimately decided to present it to town meeting as just one article.
No,
Which
that's
it
reasonable, but
typically is.
Yeah.
Any review, charter review would be a single.
no, that's more than reasonable. But I do agree that, it's probably fair to have a small ask that, where it's pretty clear which things are just, words, changed and removed, but, for people to know that if they wanted to call into question something, that they could. That's more than fair, if you ask me.
And, at the, either the warrant review meeting on the 27th or the pre-town meeting, that's where it can be made clear that, what the amending process is at town, meeting, not just for this article, but for any article. It's the same process. You gotta submit your, a proposed amendment, in writing. So if anybody has any desires, to see something, amended, they know what it is, and they can come send them the amendments to the moderator beforehand, so that it doesn't slow down town meeting to review.
So remind me, this is a simple majority vote? It's not a 2/3? Okay.
Would that be the recommendation of the committee? If people had, questions about one particular item or another, to go about it that way?
By proposing the amendments in advance of town meeting? That would be the safest way. That way town council potentially could have time to review it, because the current document as it stands, town council has reviewed it and is agreement that everything is legal.
Mr. Dow had a question back there. Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair.
Go ahead.
I would just issue a word of caution, because if you amend what this committee is recommending, if you make amendments, you don't really know how it's going to affect the rest of the charter.
Well,
Change one thing, it might upset something else. I can't right now give you an example, but, the one thing I can tell you is that the original charter went to town meeting back 50 years ago, and it was done in one article, no amendments, just done. For that reason, because if you start to chop it up, you lose it.
And that would be part of the if an amendment is submitted, part of their review is, does it affect anything else? And that, the moderator and the town council can opine on that.
I wouldn't, I would hope that nobody would try and change any wording that they put in. I would just say if somebody wanted a change completely removed. I wouldn't suggest that people should make amendments to the change to suggest a different change. I'm just saying if there's a change that you just don't want changed, that, vote, I would hope that everything on here would be voted yes or no with no I don't think it's proper for anything to be edited. I just think if there is one of these changes that people don't want, that would be pulled out and it would just be a yes or no on that exact wording. I wouldn't want people to
Well,
start
but it's kind of,
rewording.
I don't think anyone
Well, that would need
was
to be
talking
their
about
amendment, but
editing.
yeah, you're right, I agree.
Yeah.
but I think the concern with that, Jeff, is, and I get what you're saying, the concern is, we can't really say, section, chapter 2, 4-8, we're going to pull out for a separate vote, but you can't amend it. You can only vote on it up or down. I mean, only the legislature does
Okay.
that. However, I think the moderator's been very good. She's done a very good job in our town meetings of detailing in the beginning, if you're going to make an amendment, it has to be in writing, and it has to be provided in advance. We go through a multi-million-dollar budget, and nobody even talks about a single line item, and then they vote for that, and then we spend an hour debating something that is very mundane. So there could be a section in this charter review recommendation that the committee and everybody at this table could think is very mundane and makes sense, but we may end up having a 1-hour conversation about it. I would recommend clearly, again, it's the moderator's meeting, but I would recommend to her that very early in the meeting, she state that this is going to be a very, comprehensive review that has occurred. If you want to make amendments, have your amendment detailed prior to, and this is, what is this, question number 21 of 25. You've got some time before question 21, come up and speak with town council and the moderator with any amendments, rather than, okay, we're here for question warrant article number 21, and 15 amendments are raised.
Well, Brian, even if they get them to her prior to the night of, put it like a deadline, a week prior to, the warrants are mailed a week prior to the meeting.
Far earlier than that.
Right, but
Usually get it at least a
it
week
has
in
to be
advance, yeah.
there a week early. No later than that, but even if they were to get any proposed changes to the moderator prior to the meeting, town meeting.
I mean, I'll tell
That
you,
would be my recommendation.
I went through the charter and I went through these amendments because some of them I was crosswalking myself. That's what I did this weekend. And for me, there's nothing here that is like, whoa, didn't see this coming. You guys were very comprehensive. A lot of the changes you're making are logical changes because there are things that we don't do as a town any longer. There are things in here that don't align with state law any longer. All of that makes sense. I just think, folks view our charter as something that maybe it is or isn't, and this big change is going to affect me later, like, we need to dig into this. So, again, part of the whole budget presentation and discussion that happens is, I think would be very helpful to get folks to dig in beforehand, and if they are going to have amendments, just really have them to the moderator beforehand.
So I agree 90% or better is exactly as you described, Brian, but there could be one or two. So if somebody.
I never expected us to go to a town meeting once where we fairly reasonably and quickly approved dozens of millions of dollars to build a municipal complex, and then we spent an hour and a half debating the language in a charter change around making it gender neutral, instead of it always being in a male gender. And you remember that town meeting? The
I
chief
do.
was there, it was his first one, it was 110 degrees outside, and we spent an hour and a half talking about that, and we spent 40 minutes approving the biggest project in the history of the town. So, who knows? This could go through in a single vote, everybody claps, thanks George and the co-chairs for all the work they did, and we move on to the next article, but.
So if somebody wanted to amend, is it if one person stood up and said, I move that we take Article 4.2.3 separately, is it done, or does it need the town meeting voters to agree to separate it?
It would need to be
Motion, a second, and then a vote to separate.
So actually, you would need the majority of the people in the room to vote to
To
separate
separate,
it.
yeah.
Or to amend it if you just wanted, if it was just like a word change, you could also just amend, like, I want to amend section
Right.
whatever, and you need a second and then a majority
Majority of
vote,
the
and then
people
you
have to
vote
agree to
on the
take it out
amended
And that topic
item.
must be, if it's an amendment, if it's just if it's an amendment to remove it, that has to be dealt with before anything else. If it's an actual amendment, that amendment has to be closed and acted upon before you actually take a vote of the entire charter.
But I'm sure Madam Moderator would guide us through that if it were to occur.
She will.
And I guess, starts now that people are aware that that's what they're gonna, that's what's gonna be on, in the booklet, and, you have questions and that kind of thing that are serious enough, you'll take the time to, make the moves to be effective at town meeting.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for the work
Yeah,
you guys
that's
did
a-
on
that's
this.
a lot of work.
Thank you.
And,
3 years worth of
yeah.
work, guys.
So
good
heavy
to get
lift.
this wrapped up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, thank you. Item number 8 will be taking one of our soon-to-be defunct town properties and a discussion for surplus of town property and any public input for 65 North Main Street, AKA the police station. Discuss any review for proposal or proposal for appraisal, and review our updated schedule. So to begin with,
So Rick, I'm going to recuse myself from the police station
Okay.
discussion because I abut the property, some property I have.
okay, Jeff, thank you.
Didn't I put it in?
So,
Did you send it?
So I will tell you,
How you wanna-
I
go ahead, Brian.
appreciate that the town Facebook page had actually posted on this, and folks have actually started to filter in some comments about this and other
And
properties.
think about.
Some of
giving
them were
that
kind of
thought.
funny. Others were a little tongue-in-cheek, and others were actually really good input. I was hoping we'd have a full room here tonight of folks that are going to provide input, but that's okay. Sometimes our input comes in different formats. But I think maybe one of the things that we didn't say out loud, or at least maybe I didn't say out loud at the last meeting when we talked about the schedule for this, is, there are several properties that it absolutely does not make sense for us to hold on to anymore. There is no tangible need for it. The property is so outdated, or the building is so outdated in need of significant update. And there is nothing abutting it that the town owns that would make sense for us to hold on to for future utilization. The police station is surely one of them. Maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, we may want to see if Danvers wants it back before we actually decide what we're going to do, because we bought it for $1, maybe we can sell it for $2.
Maybe we can get 3.
And double our investment. But I actually think would also be helpful to the comments that are being submitted. I don't know if anybody provided any in email, but across social media and others, are you all kind of capturing those? And
So we've only received one email, and I did read through the social media. So I think some references to the Oak Knoll property to the back. One person had mentioned some type of community center for retired or older, that someone else responded that we're building a whole new council on aging just up the
somebody
road.
proposed that for the fire station too.
Yeah. So, it was a mixed bag, and I think the benefit of putting the police station first in this process, and it was a deliberate choice from us, was to just get people acclimated to the process, and so
Here
we're
it is.
gonna
Here we go.
we're gonna follow this for every single one. We'll put something out on social media, and I'm sure for some you'll have a full room. I'm hopeful. Anyway,
Yeah.
this one was a little bit more cut and dry. We do appreciate the comments from some folks, but there was an equal amount or more amount of people reminding us, some more gently than others, that a commitment had more or less been made to sell this property. And so with that said, we did go, based on the board's direction, through with securing a quote from Minco on there specifically. Just to appraise this property, it would be $2,800. If that's agreeable to this group, we're gonna go ahead and start that process.
Well, we have to appraise it
That's
anyway
reasonable.
for our requirements.
With the timeline made clear that, to the appraiser, that we would need something by mid-April, roughly at the latest, and that worked well with his schedule. As anyone may have experienced in the past few years, trying to get an appraisal quickly is nearly impossible. So that was a decent timeline and what seems to be a fair fee.
We have the article on the town meeting warrant as well.
Correct. So is that agreeable to the board?
And, you know, the appraisal is for the highest and best use per zone.
They would have to utilize the highest and best use in any appraisal.
Remind me how that parcel is zoned right now?
It is B.
So I was recently reminded today that the back third is a residential or village district,
Because of,
something to that
no,
effect.
that's it back,
And then the front 2/3 is business.
yes.
And the total size of that lot is?
1 acre.
1 acre even.
Exactly 1 acre.
It's a nice lot.
Impressive to be exactly an acre.
Yeah, right?
I triple checked it.
I know I did too.
It seems a
It
little-
was actually, if I'm remembering correctly, it was carved out as such.
They did a perfect
That-
job.
Yes.
So, a question, I know there's some parcels around it, or at least behind it, that I think there is previously a little bit of a hot spot. What, if at all, liability does the town have upon sale of the property if there's anything determined problematic?
So I'll double check with legal counsel, but it's always been my understanding that if there's something definitive we're aware of, we're obligated to disclose it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So if we are granted the authority at town meeting to actually dispose of this property and sell it, is our expectation that, so the chief and his staff would probably be departing there sometime January, February, March next year. Is our plan to be issuing an RFP for sale sometime around that timeline beforehand? I mean, what,
We
You
should
can
put it
always
out.
put a contingency in there, Brian, even if we were to send out an RFP, say December, November, you can always put a contingency in there. At that point, we would know how close we are on the municipal complex.
Yeah.
Whether we're running
no,
on time
what I was
or a
asking,
little
are we gonna wait
overtime.
until it's
No.
You
empty and
wouldn't-
vacant?
You
and
wouldn't
then-
have to wait. You can get that RFP out, then you know what your highest and best use offer is gonna be, and then you're on board for the sale. If we're running on time with the municipal complex, then we're just gonna execute the sale. Instead of waiting until January and then sending out the RFP. Because RFP, you have to give it at least a minimum of 30 days. So that's going to bring us to February, and then by the time a sale would occur, you're looking at April or May. We want to get this off the books and on the tax rolls for the August tax bill. I don't know, that's just my thought.
The last question I'd ask is, if we're gonna dispose of this property, let's just say it brings in X number of dollars. I think there was always some discussion of those dollars going into the municipal project reserve fund, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves to the 318 meeting, but there seems to be a feeling amongst this board and in the community that that building's going to probably come down and remain, which is the fire station building, and there's going to be costs associated with that. Is our expectation of potentially using dollars from the sales of any of these properties to actually support the costs of like a demolition.
I agree 110%.
Well,
And whatever's left over would go to the municipal complex account. My thought.
we gotta back up. We told people that the sales of these buildings would go to fund the municipal complex.
Right.
I don't think we should be changing.
No, I
to use it
don't
for something
disagree with
else.
that, but I will tell you I think there was always an understanding that we were gonna move to a municipal complex and something was gonna have to happen with buildings.
That's
like,
correct.
And it wasn't just, there's gonna be, like, I don't see us making an immediate decision to sell Memorial Hall, for example. We're surely not gonna sell, my position is, we're not gonna sell the fire station. It makes sense for that property to remain on the footprint of where the library grounds are.
But there will
But
be
there's
a
gonna be-
cost for demolition.
And my belief that those costs are all part of the general greater municipal
Good,
complex.
That's
and
right.
good of the taxpayers.
So, when we sell the police station, proceeds go into the municipal complex stabilization fund. We ask people for the authority to spend money, to take down the fire station, for instance, and do whatever work is there. And, we ask them if we can use money from the stabilization fund to do it. So in a roundabout way,
We are doing
you're
that.
doing what you guys are suggesting, but are also being true to the, what we were saying to the taxpayer. So we're putting the money in there, then we are asking their permission to take it out for some related purpose to municipal buildings.
So is there an expectation at this year's town meeting, we're gonna be asking for permission on the police station? Are we gonna be making any decision at this town meeting regarding the fire station?
I mean, you could put on some type of non-binding referendum, just soliciting opinion and getting discussion from town
Well,
meeting.
the reason
might
why
be
I
helpful.
ask is I don't wanna go to town meeting, get approval to sell the police station, and we state, hey, our appraise for best, highest and greatest use is X dollars. And our anticipation is that going into the municipal project fund. However, I'd like to also at the same time be honest at town meeting that there are going to be decisions made in the future, probably on the fire station. We may not be making the fire station decision to sell, to tear down at this town meeting. We may be saying to town meeting, our decision has been made that we are going to keep that property, and then we're going to do,
Right.
we're not going to have
But there will
time
be
to figure out what the
associated-
cost is to take that building down and those
We
items.
actually are getting quotes for the engineering to start, so we're early.
Yeah, so where we're at, right, like, we don't have enough runway between now and May
Exactly.
to get something firm. And we can dig into it more on the meeting that it's gonna be posted for, but we are looking at early level engineering. Because part of the conversation of taking down that building is that it's built into a hill. And are you better served raising it to grade of the square, but maintaining the storage and bays underneath, which then is keeping the hill up? And is that something you can even do? So we want to get a firm in to take a look at that. It's going to take us a little bit of time. And then you could maybe turn that top deck where the vehicles are currently parking at grade, could be some type of courtyard or something to complement the library. And some, parking right up to it or, something like that. But it's very early to be able to commit to something. But I think
But
having a
at least
conversation.
Long-term
like to
thing.
say at town meeting, an expectation is where the dollars are gonna go, and at some point, the likelihood is at a future town meeting or special town meeting, we're gonna be making a request of the voters to actually utilize dollars for potential action on the fire station.
So I think that would, I mean, it's at the moderator's discretion, but it seems at first glance that would be within the four corners of the article as part of that conversation. I think it would be important to get that on record.
Another funding source could be the CPA funds. It bought the Lois Lane property, knocked it down and, built, that, green space and parking area. So that could be another avenue, where, paying off FY '27 is the last debt service
Service.
year. So 190,000 a year is basically, coming free of that. So from supporting the debt service of the library expansion, so there's a revenue stream that could go into the library
Yeah.
property for something that beautifies the open space around the library.
Okay. All right, so while it's out there, so this is the, one of our properties, and we put this one up first because pretty much didn't have a lot of the other, contingencies involved like we just talked about for 4 Lake Street. So keep your recommendations coming. We appreciate your input. And to this point, we're still looking at trying to get the highest and the best as is zoned. And you'll have some time to give us more input as we approach town meeting, at which time we'll be able to vote on that one.
Do you need a
Jeff?
vote
I
for
was
us?
gonna ask,
I
could you
was
vote?
just gonna ask you.
Yep.
Yeah?
On the appraisal.
Just to expend those funds, we don't have the.
What was the
authority.
amount, 2,800?
Yes.
I'll
Mr.
make-
Chairman, I move that we approve the expenditure of $2,800 to perform the required appraisal of the property at 65 North Main Street for full and greatest use.
I'll second that.
All right, a motion and a second, no more discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None, passes unanimously. All right, and I guess we're still set with the schedule as is now? for
Yep.
the- for the
Yes, sir.
We're going with that, this and the other buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I could ask, if the point is, this building's gonna come down, but, or it may be sold, but, because of whatever scenario, it could take longer than 2 months after the chief and his department leaves. I assume you're starting to give some thought about what, like, mothballing costs would be.
Which building and which chief were you just referencing?
Oh, sorry. Well, the topic we're talking about tonight, which is 65 North Main
Police.
Street.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess when we have the conversation on the 18th, we're going to have the same conversation about Chief LaCole's building, as, even if we decide the plan is to raise it, to do maybe the scenario you were talking or something else, maybe it's CPA dollars, maybe it's a combination thereof, at some point, we're at least going to be mothballing that building.
Yeah, so some have a little bit of a longer term outlook than others. So at Memorial Hall, for example, I have a gut feeling we're going to be sitting on for a couple of years until we can really let the dust settle on that community conversation. Same with Council on Aging. Old Town Hall, I think, might be a little tough. The fire station will secure, but if the intent is clear that the intent is to knock it down, I'm not going to sink much into that beyond securing it.
But
I think it just makes sense.
the disposition article that you funded at town meeting in '23 and the one that we put forward on capital budget Saturday, part of the scope of that first article and how we were scoping the second one includes additional costs unanticipated for things such as engineering work, the securement, like if we had to do fencing or anything like that. That article had a wide enough scope for this general project.
But a building like Memorial Hall, for example, like I'd want to keep the heat on. Like, you don't want the building to kind of go to seed. I guess is more so what I mean. So like that's something where I'd recommend spending the money to do that, just to keep the building in decent shape for the Council on Aging. But if the fire station, if it's clear the determination is to let it go, my only concern is just keeping it secure.
Yeah.
But everything else can just, go.
All right.
Okay.
Very good. Moving on, number 9, review correspondence regarding additional cell tower needs in town.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we received this community from, correspondence, from Aerosmith, not of.
Not the band.
Not of Sweet Emotion fame, but a development company that is looking for proposed cell tower sites for lease on town property. And so we wanted to bring this forward, have the conversation with the board to see if this is something you'd be interested in exploring. Jackie and I have had some conversations. There's a couple sites that come to mind. I don't know if you want to offer up any of those or.
Well, so we have a couple of spaces in town, I want to be clear, not the parcels that the proposed location are offering, but I'm working, and I actually need to spend a little time with our treasurer and our assessor if the board is interested. So I'm not quite ready to offer parcels, but they would not be the ones included in this letter. But this could be good when you look at a cell tower assessment for a community. There's obviously the aesthetic and the beautification of a community. There's obviously the coverage maps that all the different providers have for your area. Most cell towers right now, technology-wise, are doing a 1 to 2 mile ratio of coverage. So there may be a tower in one part of town, but if someone is 2 miles away, they're not actually getting a benefit. Some tower companies are also doing repeaters on like monopoles now. So we are just looking tonight for the board to see if this is something you would be willing for us to explore and bring back to you once we've had some conversations with this vendor.
So for the edification of folks at home, the vendor has proposed which 2 locations?
105 South Main Street, which is
Which is the
a definite no,
Which is the
the
municipal
municipal
complex.
campus, and then Hockter Park.
So can I ask, at the municipal,
is-
at the municipal campus, there is going to be a communication tower already for police and fire
For radio purposes.
for radio purposes. Is there ever a scenario where there are cell towers and municipal police and fire on the same tower?
Sometimes.
Yes.
Well,
You can sell
Those would
space.
be
you can.
different.
Yes.
It's not,
And
not
there's
always.
revenue in that.
But we did not design ours for
For
it.
it,
So like we need to, we have offered space to, obviously it's police and fire tower. We have obviously have space for anything coming from the North Shore Rec program. We also have our own IT, and we also have Meld has radio equipment as well. So once if there is still room, this is a conversation that we have to have with fire and police. There may be room, but the goal is that we also are part of a regional IT and regional 911 effort. So we want to offer space to our nonprofit partners first.
Understood. So what is the height of that tower that's going to happen, and what is the height of a traditional cell tower?
Great question. It depends on elevation. Our tower is 80 feet of structure and 20 feet of antenna off the top of my head, so 100 feet in total. Other cell phone towers are anywhere from 100 to 150 depending on elevation and need.
So historically, so there was, cell towers put in Middleton on private property, and then the town decided, and there's pretty good income in them, the town decided years ago that we wanted to encourage them to be built on our property, which is why there's one up by the electric light and
And there's one at transfer station.
transfer station. So we still want to, I think we still want to encourage, if they're coming to Middleton, that we'd like them on our property and get the revenue rather
revenue.
than private property. With that said, I'm surprised immediately the 105 South Main Street were just an automatic, no.
Yeah,
well-
I'm a little,
The issue is that we already have permitted one communications tower on that property, which is ours. And we had a very limited scope of where that could be on the property because of the endangered species that we have flying on the property. So we have a federal permit for the construction of the municipal campus, particularly public safety, in regards to the eagles, which many folks have heard about. I can't speak to geographically where the eagles are, but that does affect our ability to put any other tall equipment on the property. So we included the communications tower at the height that it is, both with the special permit with the zoning board of appeals, but also with the federal government with the endangered species permit. So I would say that it's not impossible, but it is very difficult. And the only place on the property where a tower could still go and be out of cycle to need to go to the feds for approval would be on the Newtown Common, which I would not want to see have a tower on it when we just put it in. So I don't want to completely dismiss it, but from the topography of that property and how it's been designed, I mean, we'd have to pull back CPA money for the town common because it's no longer a recreational area. It's got a tower on
We
it.
are confirmed that there would definitely not be a scenario of space on that tower that would allow us to actually have the tower as permitted, us actually being on their tower instead of them being on our tower.
We're not there yet. We need to outfit the tower first.
No, I
earlier
understand that,
point.
but what I'm trying to get at is, there's a cost associated with the building of that tower.
Yep.
That we have built in our budget. That's going to be the tower for police and fire, and then potentially future usage of the rec, the regional IT, and I assume Meld is probably going to be on that as well. DPW, I don't know. But I'm just trying to find a scenario of, is that tower as permitted, could that actually be a cell tower, that we negotiate our ability to have our police, fire, meld, et cetera, on that tower as well.
So
I'm trying to see if there's an ability to flip it.
I understand what you're saying. Based on where it is on the property, it would be a very difficult tower to, like, we're more likely to be able to lease space than we are to lease the whole facility because it's in the absolute center of our public safety operation on the layout. If you look at it, like, it's in the middle of the secure parking. It would not have enough ground space because we built it for ourselves. It doesn't have the ground space that most of the cell phone tower companies would require us to give it. We'd have to, like, give it even more bandwidth.
Yeah, but the cell tower that's up at the transfer station is, also in a secure, not a police secure facility, but it's in a secure area that is locked in, the transfer station area, and there's not a lot of space there. Now, there's space on the transfer station property, but the actual where the tower is, I'm trying to find out if there's a need for additional cell coverage in the town. There's a reason why this vendor is coming to the town. Secondly, to Jeff's point of, we made a decision many years ago, if there's going to be towers, we'd like to be on municipal property, so there's revenue that's coming to the town, but also it's probably a little bit easier for us to control the parameters around that. Granted, if it's on a private property, it'd have to go before the zoning board anyway. But thirdly, I'm always looking for opportunities to actually reduce the cost of that we're going to be outlaying. Granted, it's already part of the project outlay, but that we're outlaying for the municipal project right now.
Well, yeah, first, this doesn't necessarily mean that Verizon is interested. It's not Verizon contacting us and saying, we need a cell tower.
Third party.
It's a third party who goes around trying to get sites and to try to sell to Verizon.
That's correct.
So, talk to them, explore, but until it's Verizon saying that they want the tower, it's not really worth, spending a lot of time, because
Right.
I've been contacted, by people like this many times, spend time with them and then never hear back.
You're not quite. So, yeah, and, I mean, I don't think they'd provide it, but I would sure too, when it gets to that, 101, if the timing stinks for Aerosmith as far as talking about 105. And then, they'd be showing us, clearly we want to advocate for town land, and then secondarily, show, when we get there, show us, where you're looking. Like, where are you looking on here? And why can't you put it here or there?
Remind me the second location that they had recommended.
Ogden Park.
So we'll,
Brigadoon at the end of.
Yeah,
Brigadoon.
down the end, fella, take a left.
so they're clearly looking for that location off of 114. So, but we have other things we can talk with them about. The goal is that we just wanted to come to the board tonight to see if you were interested. It sounds like you are.
Should we be calling Verizon?
Get right to it, cut out the middleman.
Yeah.
I've never been successful cutting out the middle company to whichever middle
No,
company.
because
Yeah.
they'll maintain, and they do a really
And they
good
do all
job
the-
typically
all the
in
regulatory
maintenance.
permitting.
So you really want to
So
keep
you're
that
just
third
experiencing
party.
it. Okay.
And the thing is having the third party, it's not just gonna be Verizon carrier. You can have Sprint up there.
Right,
You
right.
can have, I mean, they will lease to all these other carriers, which are only gonna be more helpful to people that have something other than Verizon.
Now, there's a bunch of
So,
dead zones
yeah,
around
we're-
town, so.
We're
matter who you provide
interested,
this.
I guess.
We'll follow up on all of your other questions about our tower. We're just not quite ready to answer them
Yeah.
yet, but when we
That's
have.
fine.
Thank you for bringing this to us.
Just an early conversation. Yep.
And it could be
But
that,
I'm excited by your excitement.
it could be that we don't build a tower at all, and they build a tower where we were gonna build it
Right.
at 105, and we lease from them.
I want to be clear, our tower's already, installation has begun. Like, we've signed contracts, like, our tower's going and.
Steals
It's, like,
the orders.
That's
It's
Yeah.
underway.
It's
Timing's-
underway.
A miss. Okay, moving on to number 10. Review of an updated vehicle use policy. I don't know if it's Jackie or yourself, John.
We'll cover it a little bit between the two of us. So the last time the vehicle use policy was reviewed, the last version anyway, was adopted in May of 2002. when I was wrapping up my time at St. Mary's in Danvers. So it's been a minute. This was brought to our attention. I just wanted to thank Sharon Bainbridge is getting 2 shout-outs in the meeting this evening for the work she put into updating this comprehensive version here. And Jackie has been helping coordinate that effort. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, a couple of things. This is obviously wildly more extensive than the 2002 version, which we did also include in your packet just for fun, because it's nice to see some historical documents sometimes. We have had an internal document that's more similar to the vehicle use policy that you see before you tonight. Sharon did work with Maya really closely and has taken a lot of language from them. They have been our property and casualty provider for a number of years. We are asking for your approval. This has been a departmental policy for a while, and a lot of the forms that Maya requires that you see as the appendices of this policy have been forms we've already been using with the departments that have vehicle fleets. But by having the board vote this policy and make it a town policy, we do get some rewards credits from Maya that will help bring down our July 1 bill.
Could you remind me, what are the current vehicles that are allowed for, that would be allowed for usage underneath this? So
Great question, Brian. So this actually includes prohibitions and requirements for both people who are driving vehicles that we own and people who are driving their own vehicles for our purposes. So it gets into safety across the board. That's like the biggest component. Vehicle inspections for our vehicles that we own in the fleet, the registration and insurance requirements, the insurance that employees that are using a personal vehicle, like we don't want our employees driving around on our business uninsured, the monthly mileage reports, which again are things that we already do. Some of our employees have vehicles that they can take home. Think of like our fire chief, for example. So they have a calculation on their income tax that we work with them on because that's a benefit.
And so in that case, it's police chief, fire chief, DPW director, deputy DPW director, building commissioner,
Health.
Meld,
health director.
DPW.
health director, Meld,
Conservation
no,
doesn't take home.
no.
What about animal control?
COA?
Nope.
Nope, COA is not taken home.
I think that's
You
it.
did a really good job of listing our fleet vehicles that get taken home, so nice work. You did better than I did at that quiz. And then the last piece of this policy that is incredibly important, and I would be remiss from both Sharon and Sarah, who oversee all of our claims and documentation for this process, is it overviews what happens if you are to get in a circumstance where we need to file a claim. All the documentation, the photographs, when you need to turn paperwork in, what detail we need. You can't use your cell phone when you're operating our vehicles. You can't smoke in our vehicles. All standard things that we've been requiring for a number of years. But if we codify it and we ask you to support it, then we can see some rewards benefit from that as well. But I think this is just kind of updating our current practice into your policy. A little bit more overdue than I would have liked. We don't usually like to let things sit this long. But with the handbook update that we did at the end of 2024, Sharon brought this to my attention, and it was a really sensible update to make.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the updated vehicle use policy as proposed.
Second.
And a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No. And a second shout out, thank you to Sharon Massios Bainbridge.
Yes.
And I just want
Putting
to
it together.
compliment Sharon and Sarah.
And
They
Sarah.
handle all of our claims documentation and coverage documentation, and I really have a much easier work life because of them. But it's really great for you, your coverage, the claims. They do an impeccable job at the documentation, and that is not an area where you get a lot of glory and thanks because you're dealing with people when they've had something bad happen to them. So I do want to thank them because they work with a ton of different vendors and our staff on this, and it's a lot of work, and I appreciate them for it.
Passes unanimously
As do
with
we.
thanks. All right. Number 11, Masco budget town update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this was organically covered in a prior topic. I don't know if there's anything else to offer here. Thank you.
Okay. Any updates or announcements to be made?
Did we hear any feedback or results from the school committee meeting? Dr. Morrison had implied that they would be talking about cuts, and do we know how that school committee meeting last night?
We watched some clips of it today, but we haven't had an opportunity to watch it in its entirety.
Okay.
So no.
Mr. Chair, may I offer an announcement?
Certainly.
So we've had some recent resignations which have been filed with the town clerk. Can I offer a list of the vacancies for boards and committees that we currently have?
Please.
So remaining from our prior conversation, we have the 3-year term on the Cultural Council and a 1-year term for 2 seats for alternates on the Industrial and Commercial Design Review Committee. And very late breaking news, we do have a seat open on the Historical Commission. They are looking to recommend someone at your next meeting, but certainly that's an available posting.
Just one?
And then an alternate, which through the June term, we saw Mr. Mullen resign from the Zoning Board of Appeals alternate role. So we are looking for another Zoning Board of Appeals alternate, which they now have no alternates.
No one was appointed.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
No.
Linda.
Yeah.
Yes, Linda.
Yeah.
So they do, but that's, so they're down, they have a vacancy once more.
We have an alternate ZBA, a single or a 3 cultural council?
A 3-year term on Cultural
3-year
Council for 1 seat.
Yep. And then we have
2 IRDC alternates.
2 IRDC alternates and a
Historical.
historical commission that are going to be coming before us at the next meeting.
Yeah, I expect Historical will come before you at the next meeting, but we're looking for those other 3 committees.
Okay.
And that's updated on the website as well for those interested.
Okay.
All right. And I'll be making my second appearance for the Council of Aging this Thursday, 11:30. Try to keep the folks entertained down there.
They're going to have some security down there.
No, but the cover charge is you have to bring some sort of donation to the food pantry, whether it be non-perishables or check.
Are
this gonna
you
be
doing a
live
gig
stream?
then?
Live. I don't know if it's going to be live stream. I have to talk to Andy about that.
Okay.
It's more of an intimate
But
gathering.
you're playing, you're not policing.
I'm singing.
Okay.
It's a small venue, acoustic set.
They said they want more dance tunes this time, so I don't know. Maybe we
You
could-
better watch out. They,
Rick Cassiotis unplugged.
they really
They're all
break up
about
the
that
floor.
dancing over there.
They
Nah,
are.
it's fun to do. I'm
I
glad they,
saw a clip of the last
glad
one.
they asked me back.
There's a lot of excitement down there.
Yeah, they were, I don't know.
It's a rowdy group.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter executive session pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3 and 2, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, negotiation, and non-union personnel regarding fire department, and not to return to open session.
Second.
Second, okay,
Roll call.
Deb, roll call, please.
Brian,
Yes?
Costa,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes?
Jeff,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
Okay, so we are now going into executive session, and we will not be returning to open session.